Hello, I'm Ngamisila Pamela Ngubane, and this is the Entity Dynamics podcast. Entity Dynamics is a culture development consultancy where we believe that culture creates behavior and behavior creates reality. The title of this video is A Note on Heritage Day. So, Heritage Day in South Africa is celebrated on the 24th of September every year. It's a public holiday, and it was actually originally King Shaka Day, but it was made into Heritage Day so that it could be a celebration of the heritage of all the South African people, not just the Zulu people. Okay, even though King Shaka obviously played a very pivotal role in the formation of the current state of South Africa, but that's a whole other story for another day. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video, A Note on Heritage Day, is because I think there has to be a discussion about what happens on Heritage Day. Okay, Heritage Day, basically, it's people dressing in the clothing and celebrating the artifacts of their particular cultures. Okay, now it's not actually a cultural celebration in the strictest sense of what culture actually means, because culture is a worldview which is then expressed through the way people dress, the way they eat, the kind of houses they build, etc. Okay, so what we have in South Africa happening is basically people celebrating cultural expression as opposed to as opposed to the actual culture that informs or is the fountainhead, philosophical fountainhead of that expression. Okay, so I think that we need to interrogate heritage, okay, because heritage is not also just what your forebears used to dress like before colonization happened, or what they used to eat before colonization, or your language, okay? Your heritage is also what other stuff you've inherited from your forebears since colonization has happened, okay? And how that inheritance affects the pre colonial inheritance, okay? And I think if we are not going to grapple with the pre colonial worldview and the post colonial worldview, or let's say the pre colonial worldview, the colonial worldview, and the post colonial worldview, then we're going to have a serious problem because there's a huge cultural disconnect in South Africa in terms of pre colonial, colonial, and post colonial. Okay. And I alluded to this when I made my video about Ilobola and how the elites of South Africa have not updated the institution of Lobola. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. All right. We have the institution of Lobola. Culturally speaking, right, it's informed by pre colonial culture, it is affected by colonial culture. And in the post colonial time, it has not been updated and brought into the post colonial reality. There's a dream of its pre coloniality, but the reality of the effects of colonization on it. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. And this doesn't happen. And this is the case with all public holidays that have any sort of spiritual or cultural significance. Okay, let's just look at Christmas. All right, Easter. Okay, Reconciliation Day. No one even knows that that's actually the day of the vow. Okay, when the Boers vowed that they would make a Sabbath of that day every year if God gave them victory over the Zulu led by King Dingaan. Okay, and then that victory was won at the Battle of Blood River. Okay, so we need to grapple with these things, and the reason why we need to grapple with these things, name, is because the cultural expression that we celebrate comes from a worldview. Okay, it comes from a pre-colonial worldview. All right. Now, generally, because there are other people who do express the how their culture evolved through colonization and in the post-colonial period. Okay, cool. But generally, we are celebrating cultural expressions that come from a pre-colonial world, which therefore were generated by a pre-colonial worldview. Okay, but we don't grapple with that worldview. We don't grapple with how the current culture, economic culture, political culture, and social culture is generally antithetical to that pre-colonial worldview. Okay. And I explained the Holobola thing. So I would say that, next Heritage Day, let us take some time and think about the pre-colonial worldview, whose expressions we celebrate and dress up in and eat in the food that we prepare. And how interested are we in actually bringing that worldview, bringing that worldview to play, to become a force that affects the current political, economic, and social culture that we are living in now. Okay. So, as part of my Entity Dynamics program, I have a program which involves giving people, well, the communities I'm working with or the groups that I'm working with, access to museum collections from overseas museums, whether they are private or public, of that contain African cultural artifacts. Okay, because very interestingly, it's estimated between 80 and 95% of all Africa's pre-colonial cultural artifacts are in museums in Europe and in America and North America. Okay. Now, the reason why this is important is because those artifacts actually are because they're a cultural expression, they're a cultural symbol, they are a window into the worldview of the society that created those artifacts. Okay. So, for example, if you look at the artifact of a walking stick, okay, the walking stick is a symbol of someone's elevation to elderhood. Okay. So what that cultural artifact tells you is that that culture values the knowledge of the elders and holds them in high respect. Therefore, they give them this stick, which is a symbol of their physical frailty, but also a symbol of their spiritual maturity. Okay, ideally, obviously, if someone gets older, it's ideal that they mature spiritually and then they're able to impart that spiritual wisdom onto the next generation. And then it also talks about the intergenerationality of the society, whereas the younger people are taught to respect the elders and the elders are taught to guide the younger people. Okay. And obviously within the ambit of Ubuntu, that would be an elder who is mature and seeking to impart a good example to the younger generation, and a younger generation that is seeking to improve itself by learning from the wisdom of the elder. Okay. So I would encourage us to start to talk about these things. And the reason why it's important, is because the more time and energy we give towards superficial celebrations of very profound things, is the lower we lower our vibration in terms of our intellect and our spiritual consciousness. Okay, you can't do something without having an effect. If you're going to trivialize something as profound as culture and heritage, then you are going to lower your vibration. Each subsequent generation is going to trivialize it more and more until people don't even know what the actual history is. They don't even know what the actual reason for certain cultural expressions were, and it's just going to be a willy-nilly thing. And pretty soon it'll just fizzle out and you become a vacuous bunch of people who don't have any spiritual depth. And that's unfortunately exactly what our elites want, because people with very shallow spirituality are very easy to bamboozle and overwhelm with too much knowledge, which their spirit, their soul is not able to actually process in a way that is beneficial to the entity. Okay. And as a result, your consciousness is also not able to gravitate towards things that are more beneficial to you, but will gravitate towards whatever you are being seduced into. So yeah, let's have the conversation. And thanks for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Goodbye.